So let's get started for today. Today we're going to be looking at callbacks and how this thing where we pass in functions to functions actually work. I've not been allowed to talk about that until now, so that is nice. So basically what we call a callback is that some function or method takes another function as a parameter. We have tried this where we can do like document.body.add event listen, and then we can say, all right, if someone clicks on the thing, and then we can do whatever. We've tried messing with this so far, but like, how does this actually work? Like, how does it know to call this thing? So what essentially happens is that we have some sort of function. Let's just call it my function. It takes another function as an argument, so we can call it like my function, and then do whatever in here. So if we actually just do hello, and then in here we can actually call f as if it was a function. So that's the basics of what happens here. So if you just in here, you'll see it writes out hello, even though we did not directly call this function in here, we call it up here. So that's the basic of what a callback actually is, and the magic in passing functions around. So we can go even crazier with this. We can go like my function 2, that also takes an f. And then we can go my function 2. Let's just move it down here. And this is going to be really, really fun. So like this. And then we actually should just remove this here. So now we call a function, this one. We call the one up here, that then calls the next function and keeps passing in this f. And as you can see, it still writes out hello. So yeah, that was the class for today. That's all we have to learn. Yep, and I'm not kidding you. That is actually all we have to learn today. But understanding this and knowing how to use it is the difficult part. So like this looks simple enough, and you have probably seen the more simple version of it, like with set timeout. We can do something after a second. So if you load the page, the console is empty. After a second, it writes out. And as you do this more and more and more and more, you'll start passing these functions around more and more and more. An important difference to notice is that if we go back to this my function sample, let's just go with a simple one.
Are you recording?
Yes, I am. So if we have another function here, hello function.
Okay, just slow down a little.
Well, I told you the first time that you should slow me down.
Slow down. Now, it's like the first function, right? So you have my function and f is a parameter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you on the second line, you have f. Are you declaring that as a function?
No, I'm on. You mean on the line 3 line that is now line 2? This one.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm calling f. So this is so as you can see here right now, my function. I'm passing in my.
How many doors did you have?
So I'm passing in my hello function here as an argument.
Yeah.
So what it essentially does is equivalent to just doing this. So I can just call it. But in this case, I'm actually passing it to another function and have that call it. And usually you end up doing something like this, where you then pass in and then call it like this. So let's say I always want this to be called after 3 seconds.
I'm still finding hard to understand where the f is a function.
So you can't see it. You can't, as part of this, you can't actually see that f is a function. You kind of have to know, because we're passing in a function here. Functions in JavaScript can be used just like normal variables. So I can do my variable is equal to 2. I can do this.
Yeah. Wait. Let's see if I can get this. So on the first one, function, my function f. F on the top is at that stage is a parameter.
Exactly.
Okay. And then further down, you're going to make that parameter a function.
No, so further down, I'm calling f. So we can move it out again here if you want. So now I'm just taking f as a function and calling it as a function.
Yeah, because all it takes to create a function is just put a set of parentheses right next to whatever.
No, that's calling it.
That's calling it.
So we have, like here, we have my variable, okay. My variable 2 could just be equal to hello function. And I can just do this, because functions in JavaScript are just variables. So now I can actually call my variable as if it was a function. But like, I can't do it with this one, because that's a number. A number, you can't call that as a function, because it's not a function, if you will. And that's essentially what's happening up here. We're just using f as a variable. I could have passed in 2. It'll break horribly when I run it, but I can technically do that because JavaScript just says I just want a parameter. Doesn't care about what it is until you call it. And that's why often, like, they tell you, check whatever you got in that it is actually a function. And if not, give an error. Let's see, f was not a function. And then return, so we don't call it. So now if you do this, if I haven't broken a whole lot of things, it'll say that, hey, 2, that's not a function. So you can't call this. So this is the basic structure. Here we're just doing functions that calls functions. And we can go further with this. So say that rather, hello function, it doesn't actually write out hello to the log. It just returns hello. So nothing more right now. If I just do this, it's a pretty boring, nothing happens. But I can say, all right, I can actually use this. Whatever was returned from the function, I can use that and log it out. And then here a really important thing happens. As you can see, before it logged out hello 3 times. Now it's only logging out hello once. Why is that? Well, here we're just calling the function. We're not using the result for anything. Chrome throws it away, it doesn't care. This one, well, we're passing in 2, so we're writing out an error. This one, again, we're just calling it. We're not using it for anything. Throw out the result. But here, we're passing it in, and then something is calling our function and using the result for something. But you can actually go further with this. Say that hello function also takes an argument. It says number of hellos. Well, all right. Then my hellos is equal to an empty string, and then I can't do that like that. It's then number of hellos I plus, and then hellos plus equal hello and a space, and then we return that. So now let's just comment these out because I know they're going to fail now. Now we can actually pass in how many hellos we want. So I can get 1, I can get 5 if I want. So now this function up here actually both takes an argument and returns something. And you really can't see that, which is kind of one of the weaknesses of JavaScript, but you kind of have to remember these things. And then we can have these functions do something.
My slowing down didn't help, did it?
Is it okay if you draw how the first step of the or point so that we would see better
Oh, so
which one was performed first?
yeah, sure.
Would that help? Yeah.
Hopefully.
So I'm just gonna make a
Try
new.
one of these maybe to help.
And then you put like and you set a timeout for like 30,000 seconds.
Because this is the old coconut seed.
It's not coconut water, it's like somebody washes his hands inside. Oh my god.
So let's say we have the hello function. Again, going all the way back to the start, and then we have, did I call it my function? And hello function, that just logs out hello. Now we take an f and we call f. nothing more, nothing less. So that's where we started. Everybody is with me so far on this one.
So you just create my function just to call if.
Basically right now, yes, it's a very, very contrived example. But once you get crazy, this f might be passed down through 20 other functions, and then some async thing happened, and then wait for another, and then an event happens, and then it calls f.
That's what we spent 4 hours trying to figure out the other day.
Yep.
So right now you just define 2 different functions, right?
And then I pass in one function to the other function.
So it's like on the very top, my function f, the f could be, you could put a hello function in it, right?
I could do this, but it wouldn't work.
I mean at the my function f at the top, you could replace f with the actual name, which is hello function.
Yes, but then the code would be a bit confusing, because then I have two things called the same thing.
So
I could also do another, let's say, hello in Danish function. I'll keep it simple, don't worry. Sorry for calling you out on that.
Keep it simple and stupid for me.
Kiss. So now we're passing in two different kind of functions to my function. So I'm passing in both hello and then hello in Danish. Because why not? Hello. I mean, if we're more technically, good day. But so this here is not really constrained by that function. That's why if I had it called hello function up here, that would probably be a bit confusing, because someone would assume that it would be this one, but it doesn't have to be. No. It could be anyone. I mean, I could probably also use a better function name. So function that says hello in some language. Yeah. Now it's slightly more descriptive than before. And that's the thing, people, if I tell you that if you have called your variables A, B, and C, that's the same thing as me calling things F up here, it's a bad idea. So that was step 1. Then we can return things from function. So step 2. So again we have my function, and we have the hello function. And we can return hello. And then we can call my function with an argument of hello function. Take an f, and then use the result from f and log it out. So now slightly more complex. Is everybody understanding that one so far? Or any questions to that? So better ask now before we go even crazy and you'll get more confused. Like, we have 3 hours today, so we have enough time for this.
There's enough time for confusion, that's for sure.
Well, can you tell me what you're confused about then?
No, okay. What my confusion is this one here. What is the relationship between this function and that function?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No.
They're two completely different functions.
Completely different. Like, I could do it then again. A hello in Danish. Not hello. And then say that returns good day. And then I could pass that in. So there's no relation between those, except one thing, but that's really, really implicit. It expects that it doesn't have any parameters and that it returns a value.
But you say that the second one should be within the first one?
I'm sorry, can you?
Okay, what I understood is that the second, it's like a function, and there's a function within the function.
No, that would be this, to make it even more confusing.
Okay, so I gotta ask.
No, it's okay. But if you say a function in a function, I would expect this. Here we are passing in a function to another function.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
So we are giving a function as an argument.
Okay.
And that's why I say this can be really, really brain racking to understand. And that's why we have so much time for it.
So f becomes a function on line 2.
No, we call it on line 2. It is already a function. I hope, otherwise the code will crash. Like we can try pass in 2 and try passing in a number. So if I pass in 2, I expect this to fail really, really miserably. F is not a function.
Yeah. It is the parameters too. I mean the arguments too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a number.
Exactly. And a number is not a function.
So
Last I checked.
when you say you pass a function in another function, so we have a function to perform needs to go through another function, something like that.
So we can actually log out f here if we want to be really crazy about it. And then you can actually see that it's a function because it write out the function definition. Say yes. Like, yeah, so that is one thing. We can also actually call these multiple times if we want. So let's just go back to this one. We can actually say call it 3 times. And let me just add it in here. And then it actually does things 3 times. So we can call these functions that we get in as argument multiple times if we want. Now, nothing is preventing us from doing that. Do you remember the array.map function we worked with last time a lot? So we basically had an array with 1, 2, 3, and then we could new array is equal to r.map, and then it's received some number, and then we could square that number or whatever. So let's try building this with callback functions ourselves. So we need some sort of function map. It should take an array, and it should take another function that we can call. So let's call it array to map and map function. Alright, so then I know my result array. I need to go over array to map, so we know how to do that. And then I need to get some sort of result by. Then here I call my map function, passing in whatever was in the array at that position. I get the result into a variable, and then I assign it into my result array, and then I can return result. So this would basically be the same thing, except now we have to call it a bit differently. So n times n. And then that's basically what the map function does. So it takes an array and it takes some sort of function to call that hopefully returns a new value, and then it saves that into an array and then returns it all. So this probably belongs better on number 2 on page step 2, but and any questions, just ask. Better do it now than during the homework. It's easier now.
If you run from line 23 to line 33, what would happen?
So like stopping here?
Yeah.
So not executing this?
Because do you need the last one? Do you need 35?
Well, technically 35 is instead of this one.
Ah, okay.
So these.
It's the same thing.
These two are equivalent.
Equivalent.
For all intents and purposes, at least. Technically, if we're doing the array map function entirely, we actually have to pass in both I and the array to map. If we're being really, really strict about it, but right now we're not.
Shouldn't it be clearer if we have an exercise related to it?
Yes, and we do.
So,
but I just want to try to catch as many questions now, and then because there's going to be a whole bunch more during the exercises.
Okay.
So how about we try doing the exercises?
Well, do it. I thought you do exercise.
No, and by we I mean you guys do. You know I don't do anything. That's my job here, looking at you guys, people doing things.
Because you were not here last time. And map and filter was discussed.
I read about that before.
How far did you guys go into the first time around in JavaScript? Well, how far did you guys go to JavaScript before we
us.
started?
Yeah.
Before we
For
started.
you?
The JavaScript
Only
version.
JS1?
Yeah.
Now we are on the same page all.
Yeah.
So these exercises, strangely enough, doesn't do this thing where they take functions and other functions and then call functions inside of functions and being very confusing. They're pretty much extensions on the other one. This thing where you take in functions like this, it's actually very rare that you end up writing these yourself. Most of the time, you're just calling functions and passing in functions. You're not actually writing something that takes function. But there's actually one more thing I want to show before we finish this part entirely. Or before you get started with the exercises. Just like we can return or take functions, we can actually also return functions. So yes, so we can go in here, and let's actually just remove that. It takes some sort of text. My function takes some sort of text to write, but then I can actually choose, all right, well, return a function that logs out text. So now we have this function in function that you asked about before.
It's useful for that upgrade. Now I can see it now.
The what?
It's useful for that the last assignment we should take. We can use this one because there's some button. You should sort the array first, and then you should enter text or enter HTML. So it can be useful.
Like any of the exercises so far can easily be handled without this. But if we call them, then let's just call it F here.
You're talking about the bay exercise?
Yeah. Because somehow you should like sort the array before you post it out.
Yeah. Could you just call array.sort?
Yeah, but you sort it, and after that you should do it, the other one.
Yes, but the thing where the thing with this is that this here all happens what we call synchronously. Later on today we're also going to be discussing something called asynchronous. But basically it means synchronous. It does this, and then this, and then it stops doing something. Async means it does something, and then some time passes, and then it does something else. Some more times passes, and then it does yet another thing. And that sounds really, really confusing when I'm saying it, but you have actually already done it when you have added event listeners. You execute the code to add the event listeners, and then the JavaScript just stops executing for a while. Then once you click a button, well, then your event listener starts executing again. This is basically asynchronous code because that allows the page to still work even though you have JavaScript running. Because in that exact moment where your JavaScript is actually running, the page is actually frozen. It just usually happens so fast you can't see it. On most computers you have 16 milliseconds to execute without it really affecting the page speed. But once you get into really complex pages and complex JavaScript, you start losing a lot of that time. So we have this code up here. So just a trick question. What does this write to the console? Just this code. Or does it even write anything to the console?
Hello?
I think it writes hello.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes. Should we check? Because we have always learned don't trust the guy who writes the code. It doesn't write anything. So why is that? What do you think the value of f is? Or what type of variable is f? Which might be a different question.
That is a fucking good question.
So what do you think it is?
Whatever the return value of my function.
And what's the return value of my function?
First, it returns another function which lags out
Exactly.
facts, which is the parameter.
Exactly. it returns another function.
So it just loops.
But there's no parameter on the other function, so it's not returning anything.
But you don't call it.
You don't call
Exactly. That's the important part. I get a function here, so I can log f out, and f is it's a function that logs out whatever was in text at that point. But I'm not calling f yet, so things doesn't actually happen until I call f, and then I can go crazy with calling f if I really want to. So in this case, alright, let's go with, just while I'm doing all the trick questions, let's just get them out of the way. What do you think is logged to the console now if we do this? So what is written in the console if I refresh the page now?
Good day. No, hello, because you should call it after good day if you want to get good day.
Exactly. I'm not calling G, so it's not writing out anything. So now, what should it say now? What should be in the console?
Good day.
Hello and good day.
Yes, and it is. What do you think is in the console now?
Hello, good day.
Hello, good day, hello.
Hello, good day only.
No, hello, good day, hello. At least that should be what I expect. And why is this? Like, it's the same function up here, isn't it? But trick question, it's not. So what do you think we get if we compare G and F? Well, hopefully false, right? Because they're not doing the same thing. So if we're comparing it like this, so we're G with G, or F and F. That's the same thing. They're pointing, it's the same variable. They should hopefully be the same. G and G, again, should be the same thing. G and F, is that the same function?
They're
Yes.
referring to the same. Yeah, my function.
Yes.
They're doing the same thing, but they're not actually the same function. And why is this? It's because when we're doing this, we're creating a function. When we're using the function keyword, we're creating a new function. So every time I'm calling my function, I'm actually getting a new function back.
Okay.
So I expect this to write out true, true, false, and it does.
But if you write one equal down, G and F, so you get right?
I'm sorry, what?
2 equal.
No, this is still false. The 2 equals is for if I'm doing, if I can type. So if I'm doing this, that's true. This is false. Yeah. So what the triple equal says is make sure that they're also the same type. In this case, both numbers or both strings. Whereas in this, it just says, they're not the same. Let's try converting them both into strings and see if they still are. And all right, now they're the same. Good enough. So because these are different functions, as you can see here, that should also explain why this still says hello. Because it still has the previous text we gave it. So this creates a whole new function we get, completely new. Let's call it function G up here. We might as well, because it's completely different from the one before. And like then you can start going really crazy. You could technically take another function up here, but let's not start doing that and confusing everybody. Alright, so now that you are, I think, probably mind blown and slightly confused, let's just take a look at the first exercise. And by let us, I mean you guys. So create an index.html file with 2 buttons. When the first button is clicked, it should log out 0. The next time it's clicked, it should log out 1. So just keep increasing the number. And the second button should also do the same thing. So 2 buttons, 2 add event listeners, 2